What's going on, y'all? Yeah, I probably should have restarted my computer. It's acting a little funny. Anyway, hope all is well with you. Uh, Welcome back to the Onyx Report, Black Masculinist news for the day. Sorry for fumbling my mic a little bit, just having some minor tech issues. Y'all know how I go. It is what it is. Anyway, uh, yeah, had to go here. Had to go here. What's up, Jay Cleveland? Appreciate that support. Hope you're well. Brother Malika, what's the word? Indigo, always good to see you, man. What's up, Ryan K? Yeah, man. Some of you guys know that I posted on both Facebook and on my YouTube community page some data I found in a study that was done a while back, and the implications of it are pretty serious, pretty serious. And I wanted to get into a little bit of that, give some explanation, show some things, because I want brothers to be aware. And this is not only something that most of us aren't aware of, this is something that even many Black male studies scholars are finding out about. Now, of course, Dr. Curry knew about this quite a ways ago. He told me about it years ago, but I had not shared this particular study. What's up, Sergeant Willie Pete? How you doing? Actually, I did share this particular paper that we're going to kind of go through tonight, but I only shared a portion of it, and probably the biggest bombshell in it. I just, I didn't think to share for some reason until the other night. So I put up some charts, and a few people got it, but I wanted to make sure I spelled it out to everybody else, especially in light of the kind of things we generally hear on social media, most particularly about Black men. I don't share this with any degree of pride. I'm not excited about it. It's not something I'm just putting it out there on the table. It is what it is. Make of it as you will. Right. So just in a nutshell, you see the title. You know what it is. Black men are the most abused group in intimate relationships. Now that runs contrary to most of what we've been told in our lifetimes, and there's a reason for that. But, intimate partner violence or domestic violence, that's always been framed from the vantage point of women. And so you'll find bits and pieces of information on men here and there, but it usually, doesn't stack up to what you tend to see with women. So I think most people write it off. As far as men's experiences with it, we all pretty much assume that men are the aggressors. Well, the reality of it is men do more damage, visibly so. Men tend to, engage when they do engage in abuse. It tends to be with their own, with their own body, and being stronger as men tend to be, they do more visible damage. Women, however, tend to initiate violence first. They tend to use more weapons. They don't tend to find themselves incarcerated to the same degree as men for various crimes, even the same crimes as men. And at the end of the day, that's not the public image of domestic violence. And we can just cut to the quick on that. The reason it isn't is because at the end of the day, we're talking about funding. Now, before I get into that, I do want to remind some of you. So, in case you don't remember, hold on. There we go. This is a brother named Michael Craig. And back in November, Michael Craig in Chicago, 61-year-old man, father, he was shot by police. But the circumstances in terms of how he was shot were peculiar. In essence, he had his young son call the police because his wife had a knife to his neck. When the police came in, they assumed that, he was the problem, so they shot him. Took his wife to the hospital, made sure she was all good, so on and so forth. But actually, Michael was the victim. He had not laid hands on her and still found himself dying. And the reason I bring that up is twofold. Obviously, because it speaks to the theme of what we're going to talk about tonight, but also because it speaks to the impact of these kinds of narratives, the impact of these stories that are constantly told strictly from the vantage point of women. And what that does in a society that has long held Black men to be boogeymen is add on to the narrative. And this is why you see on places like Twitter and so on and so forth, people calling Black men murderers and, whatever. It's what it is. But it is a product of this type of social training, this social indoctrination about Black men. Most of us are a product of it, even other Black men. But this man here not only, was threatened, had a knife to his neck, threatened by his own wife, he was eventually killed by police. Right? So that's Michael Craig. And I also bring it up. The third reason I bring it up is to highlight that the abuse that we think about, the abuse that we talk about is real. And it happens all the time. And we see it all the time. We just don't really think it through. We see it and it kind of goes in one ear, out the other. Right? So that being said, what's the reason that this stuff is so highly politically charged? What's the reason that these stories get buried and Black men walk away holding the bag on being the world's biggest villains? Well, as I said, it comes down to funding. And at the end of the day, especially if you're talking about the nonprofit hustle or any of that, this shit is like drug dealing, except you're slinging pain for profit. It's really what it is. You're slinging pain for profit. And that's what a lot of people do. You have a lot of organizations that are out there trying to secure grants, trying to secure whatever funding they can, trying to push policies so they can secure that much more funding. And truth is usually somewhere at the bottom, or I should say it's a selective truth that is financially beneficial. If you can highlight the ways by which women are victimized, you can make quite a bit of money. Start an organization talking about how victimized men are, particularly Black men, you'll hear crickets. Even here on YouTube, in terms of donating. When I post videos on Black men that are being victimized, a lot of silence, even from other Black men. It's interesting. We've been conditioned to not give a damn at all about Black male pain, right? But this stuff feeds into the hostility that we have toward us, most particularly intra-racial hostility. The hostility that we see, especially aimed from Black women at Black men in many ways, especially when you start talking about domestic violence, abuse, intimate partner violence, that kind of stuff. Oh yeah. Part of the reason it goes through the roof is because we're all indoctrinated about this and we learn to see it in very particular ways. And when you do this over generations, where Mr. from Color Purple becomes the standard face of Black men, it doesn't take much for people to believe it. I can't tell you how many classes I've sat in as a student and seen people use one incident as evidence of Black male guilt as far as abuse. Even today, you see Black people, you see people, period, using one celebrity to somehow suggest things about a whole demographic. And if you can get 3 celebrities, that's just an indictment. Damn near everybody need to go to jail behind that. But people don't often want to delve into some of the data. And there's an understandable reason why, because much of the data that we're introduced to, especially in regard to abuse, is so one-sided that who would be crazy enough to talk about Black male victimization in regard to intimate partner violence? Just sounds like walking into a wood chipper. You're just getting ready to have people call in with personal stories. And of course, they like to download a lot of these domestic violence fact sheets. And see, that's another thing in and of itself. The shorthand information we get about abuse in the public is often filtered through organizations that are primarily concerned with prioritizing Black women and girls, or women and girls in general, when it comes to abuse issues. So data about men, you'll find it sprinkled here and there throughout various studies, right? And it can be a difficult thing to get hold of, how to frame a lot of these studies all together. And then the last part of that, I think you could argue, is, you guys know I call black feminists, black feminist nationalists, they're keenly aware of this funding game, this funding hustle, and they tend to gatekeep pretty hard. So if you've come around, you start challenging the statistics, you'd be surprised. First they'll ignore you, then they'll attack you outright. And usually the attacks start out as attacks about, how you look, your person, anything like that, the aesthetics of your video or your paper, just real nominal shit. And then they try to slight you as a person, especially if they can get any dirt on you. These are tactics that are used to deflect from the point that you're making. And the reason they're doing that is because they understand that if you start chipping at this tree in terms of grant resources, it affects them much more than us, because we don't get any significant degree. So that being said, this is what it is. So I want to cover a couple of things with you guys. First, I want to start out by kind of showing you just like the little things, right? So let me tell you what I mean. So these are some statistics here. Now, these are statistics that normally you'll find on a fact sheet. Matter of fact, these top bullets come from a fact sheet called The Intimate Partner Violence in the African American Community. Fact sheet comes out of University of Minnesota's Institute on Domestic Violence in the African American Community. And it just covers some random things. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'll tell you why I'm showing you this in a minute. So just a couple of random bullets, right? Look at the second one. From 2002 to 2011, larger percentage of male, 27%, than female, 18%. Intimate partner victimizations involved a weapon, right? Of course, we know that, men will use a weapon to a greater degree. Okay. And you got to keep kind of sifting through. Oh, I'm sorry. Victimizations. So larger percentage of male victimization, 27% than female involved a weapon. So that goes to what I was saying earlier. Women tend to use weapons more. Let's go with another one here. In 2002 to 2011, about 18% of female, 27% of male intimate partner violence victimizations involved an offender with a weapon, right? A larger percentage of males were physically attacked when victimized by an intimate partner, 65%, and by a non-intimate partner, 40%. These were some stats years ago that Tommy Curry had given me. And the reason this was so significant is he had to sift through a bunch of fact sheets and data. Now, he wasn't limited his analysis to fact sheets, but these are the kind of fact sheets that you go through. And they, this looks like the kind of thing you'll see, sitting on the desk at anything from a doctor's office to, sometimes a support group or whatever. You see this kind of sitting on the coffee table in the lobby kind of thing. Don't read through this. But the reason I was showing you these various bullet points is because you actually have to sift through them just to find one or two sentences on some of these. Sometimes you can find more, but a lot of the time you got to sift to find a little bit here and there, right? Let me see. These stats here, these are some more that Tommy gave me, have come out of Carolyn West's paper, Thin Line Between Love and Hate. And this paper, this came out, I didn't put the year in this one, but I just downloaded it the other day. Bear with me. Kind of doing this as we go. There it is. Carolyn West. Okay, yeah, this came out in 2008. So 2008 in the Journal of Aggression, Maltreatment, and Trauma. Right? And some various statistics in here, but you got to be tied into this stuff to catch this, all right? 64% of Black male middle school, high school students have been emotionally abused by a girlfriend, right? 91% of Black male undergraduates reported that their girlfriends had insulted or cursed at them, refused to talk to them, or said something to spite them. 91%, right? I'm just looking at them through randomly, because I'm trying to kind of show you have to mine for this information, because you're not generally going to find fact sheets that are produced on a regular basis to talk about Black male victimization. You have to sift through it. A lot of the time, you only get a sentence or two here and there, or you'll find a paper, that goes back a ways, but it puts forth information you don't readily find everywhere. Now, this particular thing, I'll put this This is a pretty long blog piece I wrote, but I will put it in the chat so you guys have it. And I'll put all of these links that I'm going to share tonight in the description. So that was all. So I just wanted to kind of show you. But there's one particular scholar who wrote a groundbreaking paper some years ago that I want to look at. And her name is Jennifer Langenrichsen Rowling. And she's pretty well published. Right? These are just a few other pieces she's written over the years. This one is 09, Controversies Involving Gender and Intimate Partner Violence in the U.S. Linkages between violence-associated attitudes and psychological, physical, and sexual dating abuse, perpetration, and victimization among male and female adolescents. Notice how she's using both. Informing intimate partner violence prevention efforts, right? Now, this is important, and you'll see why in a moment. One of the things she writes about, especially after this groundbreaking paper that she did, is the importance of how support for those suffering from intimate partner violence is administered. And if it's administered based on faulty data, then the support is going to be faulty. This is why when you look into the Duluth model and you look into the manipulation that went on in terms of framing that and that being used to justify the basic idea that men were inherently guilty of abuse, even when they themselves were victims, that kind of framework meant that the treatment given to men and women, for that matter, was faulty because the basic idea of the Duluth model was faulty. This is kind of what she's talking about, but you'll see why I'm talking about her more in a moment. So we got 82 in here. Like, share, subscribe, join, and donate. Support the channel if you will as we get into this. Now, the paper that I want to share with you is what produced okay, so it's what produced this. Now, I've shared this before. You guys might have seen this bumping around social media some years ago, right? And so basically, I think I shared it last week, as a matter of fact. This is one of the papers she wrote, and from it, somebody produced this nice little, pie chart. Kind of gives you an easy way to look at the way intimate partner violence tends to happen, and this tends to break from a lot of the fact sheets and casual statistics people like to throw out online, because it actually centers men in a unique way, a way that isn't often replicated because people are trying to chase that money. So as you can see, right, 84% of relationships are nonviolent. Out of the 16% that are, now that's important in and of itself, right? Because when you talk about intimate partner violence, people want to give you this impression like it's more like 80 to 20, that 80% of them are violent and 20 aren't. It's an impression. But when you really look at some of the numbers, it kind of helps you situate the realities. 84% of relationships are nonviolent. Of the 16% that are violent, 58% of that is bidirectional, meaning you have violence coming from both men and women in the dynamic. Unidirectional is 42, right? So that means one gender is attacking the other. That's unidirectional violence, 42%. And out of that 42%, 28% of those are initiated by women, only 14% by men. Now, I've shared this several times over the last couple of years. And tonight, I'm going to go through some information that she gives us in her actual study that'll help us kind of not only understand this more in depth, and you can see the depths by which she went through the shout out to Mike and Tara Shea for the Cash App. I hope I pronounced that right. Thanks for the support. All right. So I'm going to show you a little bit about how she kind of put this together, and the bombshell that is the last chart that blew me out of my chair when I saw it. All right. So I'm not going to go line for line. This paper, it's over 20 pages, single space. So I think it's like 26 pages. I'm not going to read through all of it, but I will read through some portions of it as we kind of go through the charts a little bit. So let's start with cover itself. I like to put this kind of stuff on the screen so that those of you who are interested in doing so, right, can go find it and read it for yourself. This paper is entitled Rates of Bidirectional versus Unidirectional Intimate Partner Violence Across Samples, Sexual Orientations, and Race/Ethnicities, a comprehensive review. Now, why is a comprehensive review important? Because she's not just doing a study. She's doing a meta study, meaning She's studying a large variety of studies. She's pulling together a series of different studies. Excuse me. And she's studying, and she's taking the different studies and she's weighting them properly. So if they only have 100 subjects and another one has 5,000, she's weighting it so that so the information can be useful and we can take a long step back and look at it. Okay. So again, this is what she's doing. She published this in Partner Abuse Volume 3, right? And this is a 2012 paper, right? Now, this is important because she's pulling a large number of other studies into this. And even though this was written in 2012, it's still important because of the depth and breadth of the paper. In other words, it's not just how she tabulated the numbers, it's all the different studies she pulled together. So, first paragraph I want you to check out. And again, I'm not reading the whole thing, just select sections. She writes, or they write, I should say, because this is Jennifer Langenrichsen Rowling, Tiffany A. Misra, Candace Selwyn, and Martin Rowling. Right? Looks like a husband-wife combination, but we'll see. Anyway, this procedure resulted in retaining 7 epidemiological / population-based studies with a total of 82,836 sampling units, 44,930 females, 38,906 males. She basically, in all the studies she pulled together, sampled over 82,000 people for this study. So the conclusion she reached in this report is not about 5 people here, 30 people somewhere in Michigan, 45 people in New York, 10 people in LA. That's not what she did. She pulled studies from all over the place. And when she tabulated it together, the sampling units, the number of people involved were over 82,000 people. That's significant. So even though this paper is a little older, the information in it is quite relevant, and the number of people sampled is incredibly relevant, right? She said each obtained rate was weighted by the sample size from which it was derived in order to determine that the overall rate of intimate partner violence reported in these studies was 16.3%. Among those reporting IPV and using weighted averages across these samples, 57.9% of the violence reported was bidirectional. That's important, right? Just I was showing in the chart. She's saying that almost 60% of violent relationships were even. Violence coming from men, violence coming from women. It's not one way, right? Correspondingly, 42.1% of the violence reported was unidirectional in nature. Within 42.1% unidirectional violence, 13.8% was coded as perpetrated only from the man toward the woman, whereas 28.3% of the reported unidirectional violence was from women toward men. Now, that's what I showed you guys in the pie chart, right? These numbers are similar to those originally reported by Stetson Strauss in 1989, based on their sample of over 5,000 married, 237 cohabitating, and 526 dating couples. According to this book chapter, based on data collected in the 80s, 50% of violent dating couples engage in bidirectional intimate partner violence. Right? Among cohabitating violent couples, 52% were classified as bidirectionally violent. Right? 26.9% female to male, 20% male to female. Whereas 48.2% of married violent couples were bidirectionally violent. 28.6% female to male, 23% male to female. So you're getting the trend. All she's doing is she's saying that the evidence in this, the outcome of this study was consistent with earlier studies going back to the 1980s that showed that on a consistent basis, women tended to be more violent when it came to unidirectional violence than men. Among the 7 current large population studies that were used in this analysis, the overall ratio of unidirectional female to male compared to unidirectional male to female IPV was 2.05 weighted. This indicates that there were approximately 2 women engaging in unidirectional perpetration in the relationship compared to every 1 man. That's important. So in terms of violence in a relationship, and this is across race, 2 women for every 1 man engaging in violence. And before we dismiss violence, because I've actually had to have this conversation with brothers, because I had one cat a couple years ago, he used to come on my Facebook page, and he'd be like, I don't care what a woman does, she can't hurt me. I'm too strong, I can do this in the gym, no woman can hurt me. I'm like, word? Can she hurt you if she pours boiling water on you when you sleep? Can she hurt you if she poisons your food? People act like they're getting into a boxing ring and somebody's hitting the bell and you're coming out with gloves and going toe to toe. No. If you're dealing with someone who wants to hurt you, especially if you live with them, there's a lot that can happen. A lot. Remember the Bobbitt couple? She waited till he was good and asleep before she cut off his penis. But anyway, my point being that when it comes to intimate partner violence, everybody can be vulnerable. We're going to continue. So I'm going to show you a couple of these charts. Let's see what we're looking at. All right. So this one here, and I'm going to go through these kind of fast, but I wanted to put them on the screen so you can at least screenshot them, take a look at them in more detail if that's something you're interested in. I'll try and make it a little bit larger for some of these. Right. Overall rates of violence and comparisons of rates of bidirectional and unidirectional violence within the violent group among the large population samples. So here you can see on the left, right, the various samples, the various studies that she's pulling from. Look at the population sizes: 1,700 women, 1,700 men, right, 6,000 females, 5,200 males. You can see the sample sizes, right? 20,000 females, 15,000 males. She's pulling that they are pulling together a number of these different samples and going through them. And you can see here the various breakdowns, right? Percentage of bidirection within an IPV, right? Percentage of unidirectional violence, one gender to another. You can see a breakdown there. And then they have it broken down here, male to female, female to male. Notice that the female to male violence is consistently higher than the male to female violence. And again, this is across race. The female to male violence is consistently higher. And what this last column shows us is the ratio. So basically, it's 2-to-1, right? Female to male violence. Right? It's basically what the ratio breaks down. So I want you guys to see this. So this is just one page, right? Let's go to another. Overall rates of violence and comparisons of rates, same deal, right? You can see a variety of other studies that she's using. These are all the importance of most of these charts is that she's showing the different studies that she's pulling together. You can actually see the sample sizes involved. They vary. Some of them are a couple hundred, some of them are a few thousand, some of them are far more significant than that. The point is, she's giving you receipts on where she's pulling these studies from, when they were done, what sizes were involved. See, this is what kind of makes this information difficult to dismiss, even though it was written in 2012, because it's not just, she's not just saying, X number of people were killed this one year. No, she's actually showing you these are the studies over time that have accumulated so that we can actually look at human behavior. And again, right, the last three columns: male to female violence, female to male, and the ratio. Again, you notice female to male violence is much higher, right, on a consistent basis. Except occasionally you'll see the opposite. See, in this Temple study right here, you can see that the male violence was higher, right? But then you go back. See, the point she's making is not across the board in every circumstance is female violence higher, but it is more consistently so. Let's go on to the next. Again, see, look at the studies. Right? Population sizes when they can provide it. Again, male to female, female to male. Noticing the trend. Sometimes it's even. Sometimes the males are higher. The majority of the time, the female violence is higher. Again, I'm not going to go through in great detail, but you can screenshot these and look at them and take your time. That's why I'm putting them up like this, so you can actually look at this in more depth. Right? So male to female, female to male. These are even in this particular study, slightly more for females in this study. See what I mean? But she's showing you the trends. And that's what's more important is what are the trends on a larger population, not what happened. See this, when I was in graduate school, even undergrad and graduate school, and I've said this before, when I would have classes in women's studies, or they would take a class that was supposed to be literature or something and turn it into a women's studies course, and we did talk about abuse. Well, often we'd read a story about a man that did something heinous to a woman, or that we'd bring somebody in who experienced something heinous. And then others in the class would talk about their personal experiences. And most of the time, the men would be silent because it really wasn't about abuse, it was about female victimization. And that's why it actually took me so long to realize that what I had experienced as a child actually fit into the conversation, but I didn't know it because so much of the conversation was framed around solely dealing with female victimization. But again, you can see here, some studies show more male violence, as with this first one here, you know. But the question is, what is happening most consistently across the board? So going to the next, right? Comparison of unweighted overall rates of violence, rates of bidirectional and unidirectional violence, right? You can kind of see the breakdown. Again, you can screenshot them, take some more time to go through. And this is just going to be a quick hit because I just want you to get the overall point, right? So some of the studies, they didn't have enough information. So the dash means they didn't have enough information to break it down, right? This is the core of tonight's broadcast, right? Table 8, page 218. Rates of bidirectional and unidirectional violence reported among white, black, and Hispanic ethnic groups from the same sample. What do you see? Well, right, we know that for the first 3 columns, they fall under white. The next 3 columns fall under black. The last 3 columns fall under Hispanic, right? Bidirectional just tells us what percentage in those studies did the violence that took place in the relationship, was it mutual? Was it male? Again, male and was it both male and female violence? Right. When it comes to white relationships, you can see the bidirectional rate 44, 63, 44, 64. You can kind of see the breakdown. For Hispanic, you can see the bidirectional rate 45, 60, 43, 60. That's what it is. For black relationships, the rate of bidirectional violence in relationships 61, 67, 53, 69, 66. Right? This is why we've been saying for the last few years that when it comes to intimate partner violence in black relationships, the rate of bidirectionality is even for the most part. But what this study shows us is that often it's female to male. So male to female violence, right? 8, 12, 13, 10. These are the percentages of men initiating violence. Here, female to male, 31, 20, 34, 21. And notice how much higher the levels of violence are than other groups. Right? This is so just to look at the first one, right? So in terms of this first Kitano study in 2005, male violence 17%, female to male violence 38%, right? For a black 8 and 31, for Hispanic 19 and 35, and you can kind of see the breakdown. But at the end of the day, the rates are higher, and this is the important thing. And you can see it kind of tabulated at the bottom, right? So female to male violence, see it kind of go. Now what they will show you in this report, however, is when it comes to military relationships or relationships where you have couples dealing with substance abuse, then you can see more male violence. But in relationships that are not rooted in non-military relationships, so on and so forth, right? You can see it. And you can see it if you look at this line here where it says ratio of female, right, to male to female, right? That line here. For whites, female initiated violence is at 2.26%. For Hispanics, it's at 1.34. For black folk, it's 2.75. That's how much more violent women are in relationships to black men than other groups of women are with their men. And as Green Gorilla has pointed out on a regular basis, this is not about self-defense. That's used as a deflection to not have to deal with the reality that women are not shrinking violets, that are just here getting smacked around. And no, they're initiating violence to a greater degree. And unfortunately, the group that's on the receiving end, the group of men, were really across any of these different dynamics, white, black, Hispanic, males, and females. Black men are on the receiving end more than any other group. This is what I want you guys to see. This is the importance of understanding this. Because again, we're talking about over 82,000 people sampled. That's pretty significant. And it's not just the sampling, it's a large number of studies that have been done to study those samples. Right? That's the importance of this. This is important because if anything, this is the stuff that gets left out of the conversation. See, a lot of the time when you hear something on television or in a debate as far as domestic violence, again, we're dealing with funding. We're dealing with individuals and groups, especially when you talk about scholars. You're talking about those who are looking for promotion, those who are looking to get published. It's not easy to get published talking about black men in this manner. You talk about black men going to jail and being boogeymen, you can do quite a bit with that. When you actually start pointing out black male victimization, people don't really know how to process that. And again, I'm not on a victimization kick just to be on it. That's just what the data says. And I'm sharing the data because this is the part of it that gets swept under the rug. This is the part that gets swept under the rug. This is the part we got to be able to talk about with authority. Because I can tell you, I've been to I don't know how many conferences over the last 30 years. Never heard this. Never. Sat in classes as student and teacher. I've co-taught courses. I've sat in colleagues' courses. Never heard it. Not until the last decade did I start to hear about this. And even then, it was only with a select and fairly small group of scholars. So anyway, I just wanted to drop that, share it with you. Again, I'll put some of these links in the description. This particular paper, I had to get it out of actually, what's interesting? When I was looking for this, I actually had to order it. I had to do an interlibrary loan because I couldn't get hold of it. And it took a while for me to get. I don't know why. But anyway, I'd used it before, and I think I've gone through a couple hard drives since the last time I used it. I think I used it the very first year I started my show. And, basically lost it in a hard drive, had to get it again. And it wasn't easy to get. And I don't know why. But I thought it interesting to share. So, sift through this, look at it on your own. Let me see. I think there's one other section of the paper I wanted to share with you guys before we go. And this is actually what she's writing before we get to that. So I'll share two paragraphs. First one reads, as shown in Table 6, this exact same pattern of findings was obtained when comparing the ratio of female perpetrated to male perpetrated unidirectional violence across the 5 types of samples. High ratios of female to male violence compared to male to female violence were found in epidemiological, community, and school samples. Equal rates of unidirectional violence were obtained in the treatment-seeking samples, and high ratios of male to female compared to female to male violence found in military legal justice samples. So again, that was what I was saying earlier. When it comes to military relationships, somebody in the military, and when it comes to treatment-seeking groups, that's where you tend to find more male to female violence. But non-military is a different matter. Let me see. Okay, so here's the crux of it. Additional preliminary analysis were conducted to determine if the rates of bidirectional versus unidirectional violence differed significantly by race. As shown in Table 8, that's the one we just went through. Among the non-military samples, the rates of bidirectional violence differed significantly by race. Specifically, only 50.9% of IPV was bidirectional, according to white reporters, and 49% of IPV was bidirectional among Hispanic reporters. Reporters being those who reported their situations, right? Excuse me. However, among Black reporters, 61.8% of the reported IPV was bidirectional. Among those engaging in unidirectional violence, significantly different ratios of female to male as compared to male to female violence were obtained across the three racial ethnic groups. The ratio was 2.75 for Black reporters, 2.26 for white reporters, and 1.34 for Hispanic reporters. However, as noted at the bottom of Table 8, these ratios differ dramatically from those reported earlier when the sample is drawn from military or treatment-seeking groups. Right? Race was also considered in several other articles that couldn't be coded as per Table 8 in the study of Galvin 2004. Among people with HIV, bivariate analyses indicated that African Americans and Latinos had significantly elevated probabilities of being both perpetrators and victims of IPV as compared to white. So relationships dealing with HIV, right? But the point that she's getting at here is a little different. Okay, so she says the odds of being in a relationship characterized as mutually or bidirectionally violent were significantly elevated for both non-Hispanic Black men as compared to white men, and for non-Hispanic Black women as compared to white women. A related study by Prospero and Kim studied 676 university students in heterosexual relationships, males and females from 4 different ethnic groups, Black, Asian, Latino, and white, were assessed for IPV perpetration and IPV victimization in their relationships. Strong positive correlations between physical IPV perpetration and victimization were obtained for women and men from all 4 ethnic groups. These results were interpreted in support of the contention that bidirectional violence is common across all ethnic groups, as reported by both men and women. So basically, what this entire paper pushes us towards. Hold on, let me see. Do I want to share this part? Okay, yeah, I'll share this last part. Because this deals with what I started talking about when I introduced her in the beginning. However, the substantial rate of bidirectional violence found across all types of samples should necessitate that treatment providers in all settings acknowledge that many violent relationships, regardless of how they are identified, include acts of perpetration from both partners. Failure to assess and address this reality is likely to result in less effective interventions and a reduced understanding of how each partner in the relationship is experiencing the IPV. It may also interfere with the development of clinical rapport with all participants in treatment. All right, so in a nutshell, what she's saying is that you got to take the information from this study, and it has to actually change the way people are helped. When people go in for help for intimate partner violence, the people administering the service have to actually know enough of this information to change how they deal with victims, change the questions they ask, change the way they interact with them, because the current assumption is that violence is strictly men on women. That's it. She's saying once you understand the data, you can't operate that anymore. And that's what they were doing with the Duluth model. If a man came in who had been abused by his woman, right? The idea was, well, we're going to help him, but we're basically going to help him by showing him how he caused this and how being a patriarch or being a part of the patriarchy kind of caused all of this. There was, very little personal responsibility as it came down to women as initiators of violence. So what they're saying in this particular study is what they've researched here has to change the way these services are administered. People have to know, they have to make different assumptions. They have to interact differently. And that means when a Black couple comes in, or a Black male for that matter, you can no longer just have the assumption that they are immediately the aggressor, despite stereotype, despite the common practices. At the end of the day, you have to deal with the reality on the ground. And were that to be taken seriously across the board, Black men would need to be completely reevaluated in terms of how they're treated. Because what this study is showing us is that across the board, women tend to be more violent. They tend to initiate violence to a greater degree. They tend to initiate it first. And if anything, when you break it down by race, Black women tend to initiate violence against Black men more than other groups of women initiate violence against other groups of men. So I hope this was useful to you. I hope this, something you can add to the discussion to complicate the assumptions that people are quite comfortable making about Black men and women. And more than anything, I hope that, well, I won't say more than anything, I hope that you're safe. And if you find yourself in any of these situations, you seek help. But I will say one of the things that's incredibly important for us to understand is that this is political. And what governs which information gets more press comes down to money and who has more access to it. And because feminists really open the door to this whole discussion about abuse, they are not trying to give up ground to male victims, even when males find themselves victimized to a greater degree than females. Because giving up ground eventually means giving up funding. And ain't nobody trying to do that. This is why when I talked about the African American Policy Forum in my last show, this is why it was so important to foreground Black girls and kind of bury Black boys and men under the rug. Because at the end of the day, African American Policy Forum as a think tank is about producing data that helps organizations secure funding. And it's not as easy to secure funding if you're really just talking to the numbers. Because if you're dealing with the numbers, you can't sidestep Black males by any measure, at any age, really. But they do, because it's more lucrative to focus on Black girls. And the boys suffer. Well, based on this study, now we're looking at the adults. And now we're sidestepping the men to prioritize the women because there's more funding there. And the men get swept under the rug. What's worse is many men will participate in this because they don't want to be associated with weakness, victimization. I get it. But at the same time, this is what it is. This is what it is. You can deal with it. You can sweep it under the rug and help those who are already trying to bury the data on Black males, or you can call the shit out for what it is. What they used to say, my grandmother used to tell me, tell the truth, shame the devil. Hey. So y'all do with it what you will. Hope this was helpful. Y'all have a good night. Give me your thoughts in the comments section. I look forward to checking them out. Peace.